Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Dr. M. Pistija, retired recently as professor from the Department of Library and Information Science, Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar. Today, we are going to speak about library classifications, their processes, techniques, uses, and limitations. As in the first video, I told you that classifications are used in every sector and in every sort of organizations, and libraries are no exception. In fact, classifications are mostly recognized with libraries, you being student of library science. But in libraries, we use not simply classification, but what should be known as library classification, book classification, or document classification. Library classification is most important and very core activity of librarians, as libraries cannot exist without classifying or grouping or arranging books for easy location at the time of need. The classification is even included in the definition of a library itself. It means a library without classification is simply a dump of books, not a library, not a service library, because it won't be able to serve its reader promptly and will not be able to organize its knowledge for information retrieval in the later, uh, even in the uh, late times. Classification is so important for libraries and librarianship that one renowned classificationist and educationist, Bernard Palmer, said that classification is the foundation study of librarianship, that it is a core study of librarianship and it should be studied by all the students. It means that classification is not simply for arranging documents, but classification has many roles in managing libraries. It is a tool for library management, it is a tool for library services. In fact, the modern librarianship started with the invention of modern systems of classification, uh, that is DDC, in the 1876. And so is the year of the start of the modern librarianship in history of the library science all over the world. In this module, we are going to study the different classification systems which are being used in libraries and what sort of problems they have and what scope it has. Library classification is not all problem solving, but it has got its own problem that we will study also in this module. Since antiquity, libraries are established to acquire, organize, house, preserve, and make available to users books and other documentary heritage of mankind. After selective acquisition, the documents have to be organized for retrieval whenever required. Classification is a tool of organization. Books and other information sources such as AVs, CDs, multimedia, and e-information sources have to be classified and arranged like other physical objects. Since antiquity, librarians have classified books to form convenient groupings for relocation at the needed time. Every item in the library has to be organized for location and retrieval at the time of need. An unarranged collection is just like heap of books, not a library of by definition. To find a book from such a library will be like locating needles from a huge heap of grass. Hence, a library is always organized. Otherwise, it will not be a library, simply a dump of books. Classification of documents and other reading materials is indispensable for any library. Various standard and local methods for arranging library materials, ranging from clay tablets, papyrus rolls, monographs, and other print documents, have been used from time to time by librarians to organize their collections for better use by the users. Their classifications have varied from homemade to ad hoc systems to somewhat adopted from some universal knowledge classification systems. Earlier, classifications in libraries were on various methods, but today classifications in modern libraries are arranged according to subjects group, and that is, you call it Knowledge classification. Since the late 19th century, libraries have developed many standard classification systems pioneered by Dewey Decimal Classification in 1876, invented by Melville Dewey. Before Melville Dewey, books were arranged by a method which is known as fixed location system. The call number then indicated the shelf ground on which the book was stacked. For example, call number, say 2.4.6.25, meant that it was a 25th book on the 6th shelf of 4th almirah in the second room of the library. Thus, a book could be located even by a blind person, even in a dark room. Its another advantage was saving of shelf space, as such systems acquire vacant place only at the end of the shelf or almirah. Present-day systems called relative location systems require space for intercalation of new books at every point on the shelves. So on every shelf, some space has to be left vacant for inculcation or insertion of new books to keep the relative location of books ongoing. In fixed location, maintenance of subject grouping was difficult. This was one problem to invent the new systems. Fixed and relative location systems. New books could be accommodated at the end of the shelf, whatever the books had to be shifted to another place. Their call number had also to be changed. That involved a lot of labor and a wastage of time and money. Melville Dewey invented a relative classification system to solve this problem. His question was how to give permanent call number to books in a library, because he was always against wastage of time and money. He wanted that a system should be invented in which a number given to a book should remain permanent forever. That led to what is known as the relative classification system or the modern classification systems. Dewey's invention was a social need and product of its time. In the then emerging industrial society and burgeoning democracy of the late 19th century, there was an attitudinal shift in the values of education and libraries. Importance of literacy was recognized for aware and responsible citizen in a democratic society. Access to education was democratized and opened to all. That's known as education for all, became the objective of all the welfare states. To meet the needs of society, not only many new libraries were established by law, the doors of libraries were open to all and sundry scholars, students, new literates, poor students, housewives, old and handicaps, ethnical minorities, and other marginalized sections of the society without any discrimination. Definition of classification. Formally and traditionally, library classification has been defined as the arrangement of books and other reading material in a way that is helpful to the users. Today's libraries are mostly arranged by subject, though different types of collections are arranged in different ways. For example, government documents, patents, or standards are arranged by their own official codes. Current periodicals are arranged alphabetical by title, but bulk or majority of the books are arranged by subject according to some disciplines. Maps, CDs, pamphlets, photographs indeed require different and separate arrangement. Making of library classification system is also classification. Designer of a classification system is known as a classificationist. Operator of a classification system is called a classifier. Ranganathan has given 5 meanings of classification in his Prolegomena on pages 55 to 60. Importance of library classification. Classification is vital to library services. In fact, systematic classification is implied in definition of a service library. It supports all library services. Classification is to library as skeleton is to human body, on which all the body organs rest. Classification of a library collection is its content map. In a library, classification serves all the functions, namely a tool of management, brings aesthetics and knowledge creation. It also helps in collection development. Before Melville Dewey, classifications were applied in libraries and they were all homemade. It's no more possible now, keeping in view the complex needs of the library users and expectations from the classification systems and the growing complexity of documents. Moreover, making a workable classification is a daunting task both in terms of intellectual labor and skills and high financial cost. It's no more the necessity even in a view of the easily availability of many standard and universal classification systems since the publication of the DDC in 1876. And it may be emphasized that many times many libraries try to make homemade classifications, locally invented classification, but ultimately they do not work and they have to shift to a standard classification like the colon classification or Dewey Decimal classification or the Library of Congress classification, and they have classified all the documents, wasting a lot of time and money. So it is better advised that in the beginning they should choose a standard classification, a universal classification that may be more helpful and the readers will understand them better. Types of library classification systems. Classifications can be typed or classified themselves into various ways. Library classification may be general, that is covering the entire gamut of human knowledge. That is universal, covering all the subjects in all the languages and in all over the world. Such systems are suited to cater to the needs of general libraries, both big and small, from national library to the village library, where they have all sort of books. Academic libraries also use such systems, that is general systems. On the other hand, there are institutions which acquire in-depth or minute documents, and they also require special classifications to organize their micro-literature, and we call them special classification systems. Apart from general libraries, or in contrast to general libraries, there are special libraries of institutes like the Rubber Research Institutes or the Petroleum Research Institute and development centers, or say the libraries of a defense research centers or even the library of a mathematics department. They require in-depth and special classification systems. General classification systems. Since Melville Dewey, many general classification systems have been developed and used. The DDC has proved to be the mother of all modern classification systems. Some of the universally known general classification systems are Dewey Decimal Classification, invented by Melville Dewey in 1876, which is now in 23rd edition, published in 2011. Expansive Classification by C.A. Cutter, published in 1893. UDC, that is Universal Decimal Classification System, which was published in 1896 and now it is in various editions. Library of Congress Classification System, developed in the beginning of the 20th century by the Library of Congress Classification itself. Then there is another subject classification authored by J.D. Brown, and it was the first classification published in UK. Colon classification, S.R. Ranganathan's classification, published in 1933, and it is now in 7th edition, which was published in 1987, but it has not been revised since then. Bibliographic classification by H.E. Bliss. Its first edition was published in 1953, and its second edition is being revised, and it is considered as one of the modern classification systems, but it is not still complete. And lastly, there is a classification known as Ryder's International Classification by Ferment A. Ryder, which was published in the year 1961. But this classification is not popular and it is gathering dust because this classification was very broad and it's not being in any library anymore. Classification systems of special nature. A classification for specific and restricted area of knowledge, for example, economics or even banking, occupational safety, diamond technology, women studies, Indology, Nepology, China studies, is also known as a special classification. And these classifications are narrow in area, but they are quite depth to classify micro-literature, just like journal articles, reports, and so on. Some of the examples for special classification systems are UNICLASS, that is Unified Classification System for Construction and Industry, published in London in 1997. London Education Classification, University of London, it is only meant for pedagogy or education subjects. London Classification of Business Studies, published by London Business School in 2000. It is a classification for management and business studies. Then Thesaurus of Psychological Index Terms, published by Washington American Psychological Association. And this is classification meant for psychology and related subjects. Special classification inevitably are depth classification used for classifying and indexing micro-literature in the form of journal articles, research reports, theses, standards, patents. These are eminently useful for information retrieval in special libraries and information centers. Ranganathan calls them depth classifications, but they are also known as special classification systems. Only characteristics or use is that they are necessary for information retrieval than for arranging documents on the shelves. Special classification systems do not exist alone. They have to live with some other system for related subjects. For example, in case of management, students of management have not only to study management, they have also to study, uh, for example, sociology, psychology, mathematics, law. So, for these subjects, a special classification on management will have to rely upon some general classification, or will have to devise their own system for classifying such subjects. So, special classifications are not alone, but they have to be worked in tandem with a general or more specialized classification system. On the other hand, a special classification may be a mere extension of a certain class of a general classification system. For example, in India, many local made detailed extensions exist of DDC class number like 954 Indian history, 294 Indic religions, 181.4 Indian philosophy to adequately classify such subjects in Indian libraries, because we require very special and extended classification for such subjects, whereas the DDC doesn't provide the specialized or minute extensions of these subjects. So whenever we extend these subjects, they also become some sort of special classification systems. Special classifications are not simply of subjects. They can be special according to the form of the documents. Special forms of documents such as official reports, patents, standards, maps, CDs, videos are arranged by different methods. They also make some special classifications. Some official documents such as reports, patents, standards bear some, or even government documents bear special code numbers. These are arranged by official numbers, not by subjects. That also make a special classification. Pamphlets are usually arranged by title. Periodicals are also arranged by title. Popular fiction is mostly arranged alphabetically by author. There is also what is called user-oriented system or user interest classification. There are even local and ad hoc arrangements to place together all books at one place likely to be required by a single group of users, say housewives or students of a simple class. So all these are some sort of special classification systems by form. Late Jack Mills, an eminent classification from UK, has listed following sections of the library or form of documents which may require a different or special type of classification arrangement in libraries. These are age and grade of the library user, government documents, patents, standards, reports, data tables, current and reserve stock, size of the documents, media of the document, that is films, cassettes, CDs, web documents, etc. Fiction, documents for abnormal readers such as the visually and physically challenged. Value of documents like manuscripts, rare material, special editions, extra form of presentation like bound periodicals, etc. Date of printing, incunabulas, old books, rare books, invaluable books, they all need a special kind of classification, and we will require special grouping, and we have to devise some special methods to arrange such things in the library to mark different sections. And these may also be called some sort of special classifications. Uses of classification in a library. As already said, classification is a practical tool. It has got many uses in every sphere of life. In library, the classification has got many uses, which can be outlined broadly as follows. Classification brings together books on the same subject. Thus, a patron or client get all the books at one place, which is much more convenient to the users. It saves the time of the users. It helps to replace the books at their correct places or proper places when the books are returned to the stacks after their home or inside use. It means that the arrangement can be maintained by classification before and after use of classification, and this maintenance is forever. It shows hierarchical and associative relations which are essential for retrieval of specific and related subjects available in a library. It's some sort of a cognitive use, we can say it. It shows a relation between subjects. So classification is not simply a tool for arrangement of books, it also shows relation between two subjects, that it is a map of knowledge, and also shows the relation of one subject with the other. Continuing with the uses of classification, and one better use of classification is that it facilitates browsing by the scholars. One of the great functions of library classification is browsing. Browsing is that it helps to look at the books without any certain purpose. By browsing at the shelves, the scholars discover many new findings, new books which they had not earlier known. So it is admitted that every library should allow browsing of books by the scholars and other users. Browsing is to look at library collections without any specific purpose, a sort of window shopping. Browsing is a habit and pastime with the scholars. It is only possible fruitfully in a library organized by subjects. Browsing always leads to incidental discovery of long needed and valuable information. This incidental discovery is known as serendipity. So if browsing is not allowed, then I think library is not providing one of its best function, and it is keeping the scholars away to enjoy or looking at the knowledge on the shelves. General to specific order of arrangement with some notational maneuvering has been turned into pedagogical order in a scheme like the colon classification. Ranganand calls it a pupa pattern on the shelves. It is quite helpful for the self-learners. The systematic arrangement of books in open access libraries is helpful in self-learning. That is, a pupa pattern arranges books from general to specific, or the way the knowledge grows. So even a child can learn from the pupa pattern, that is going from simple to complex subjects. So it is a function which is provided only by the colon classification, and it has been achieved by the use of what is known as different types of common isolates. Functions of classification in a library. It has been claimed that a library classification has three functions, namely cognitive, information retrieval, and shelf arrangement. Cognitive function is to represent the structure of knowledge and interrelation of subjects. This is to draw a map of knowledge. Classification is a map of knowledge indeed. It easily reveals intrasubject and intersubject relations. Many library classifications, for example, Ranganathan's colon classification, Bliss' bibliographic classification, and BSO, that is broad subject ordering, have emphasized this function. Many bibliographies, catalogs, etc. are systematically classified for better use. UDC was designed to arrange entries in a universal bibliography. This is a bibliographic function which helps in information retrieval. This is to arrange and retrieve micro-subjects and documents. Being cognitive map of knowledge, classification is at the root of all indexing systems such as thesauri, subject heading lists, taxonomies, and anthologies. Thesauro Facet, an efficient tool in knowledge organization and retrieval, is based on facet classification methods. More of this you will discuss in a module 16. Third, of course, is the shelf arrangement, for which schemes like DDC were originally designed. Now all the library classification perform this function very well. But a library classification goes beyond shelf arrangement. It has been found useful in reference service for facet analysis of users' questions in reference interviews. It is useful for arrangement of circulation record in the library. It helps in building a balanced collection of documents in library by revealing gaps and redundancy of collection. It means it is a editor for the collection. If a collection is lopsided, or it has more collection in one area and less collection in other, so classification will show the gaps, and which can be filled by the librarians. It helps in editing and weeding the collection to keep the fit and service. So classification is also good to weed out the unnecessary books. It is a location tool. Without classification, the library catalog will not be able to function properly. It is used for preparing shelf lists. It has been rightly said rather, that classification and cataloging are synthesis of one another. Classification is the basis of all information retrieval systems and methods, both in manual and electronic systems. There can be no retrieval of subjects or concept without proper classification. This has been admitted by the various classification groups. The CRG, that is Classification Research Group London, has made it a manifesto that all basis of indexing and retrieval is classification. So this is the best purpose of classification which is being served on the net these days, that all the information sources on the web are organized and can be retrieved by applying a better classification systems. Going beyond the shelf list, classification can be easily used to arrange and retrieve records in electronic databases. Online public access catalog, that is OPACs, function far better when class numbers are provided as another access point. Earlier it was thought that OPACs do not need class numbers, but now the research has revealed that if we add class numbers, or if we want to access the documents through OPACs by class numbers, they can give us a better results, and the results are relevant and more accurate. In fact, the electronic information era, it has found so many new uses that it is rightly said that we are witnessing the second golden age of classification. To elaborate, I can say that when the computers came on the scene, it was thought that classification and cataloging are no more needed, and classification and cataloging were thought as have lived their life. But now it has been proved that even the electronic documents or online documents on the web need better classification, and the research nowadays is concentrated or focused on the use of classification on the web. Conventional classification systems such as DDC, UDC, Library of Congress classification have been used to organize and search information on the World Wide Web and search engines. Search engines like Yahoo, Google, AltaVista use broader classification methods for organizing their information. Of course, they do not use classification as we use in libraries, but they use some sort of categories and for organizing and retrieval of information. Otherwise, these search engines will not work even if they do not work on or use primitive classification. So we will continue with the use of classification in the electronic environment. For example, Excello is a search engine which uses faceted classification, which returns precise information. It uses Google database but adds on extra level of classification to refine search. They have been defined as Google++. In the web environment, at least 7 functions of classification have been identified by Professor Louis Chan. These are location, browsing, hierarchical searching, retrieval, identification, subgrouping, that is partitioning, and profiling. It has aptly been said that classification is mathematics of librarianship. Classification is indispensable. That's right, because libraries cannot work without classification. There are many day-to-day routine uses of classification in a library, so much so that it will be impossible for a library to function properly and achieve its objectives without a sound classification. Better the classification, better the library services. There are many opponents of classification too, who project it as a costly process in more than one ways, but mostly they have all proved wrong. Alternatives they suggest are much more costlier and cumbersome. These alternative experiments prove that there is no substitute for library classification. It has aptly been said that a book is the foundation of library, but classification is the foundation of librarianship by Bernard Palmer. Indeed, there is no escape from nor any substitute to it in libraries or life. If you escape classification today, you have to pay or you have to reinvent it in one way or the other at a very high price. Limitations of classification. Classification is not all good or heaven. There are many limitations to it, and there are also many problems. Namely, classification has been described as mathematics of librarianship. Yet, like the value of pi, classification is never exact. Classification, especially the library of classification, has many limitations and problems. Classifications are social, not natural, as already said. These do not satisfy the needs of the library users. Only majority are served, while some users with specialized needs require different arrangement. It is a costly process and subjective too. Two classifiers may differ widely on the correct classification of a given book, and both may be correct. Not only this, a classifier may class a given book differently at different times depending upon the perception and its utility. So, classification is not absolute. No classification can comprehensively represent the total subject dealt in a book. That is the real problem. Even a monograph may deal with more than one subject at a time in classification, but only in classification we represent one aspect, that is the dominant one. And all the side subjects or the hidden subjects, they go unnoticed and they are not retrieved. So the information in that book lies hidden. Majority of the information in the books lies hidden because classification gives a number to the summary, to the broader ideas, not to all the ideas contained in the book. So this is one of the great limitation of classification. Another limitation of classification is that classification systems are not independent. They invariably need the alphabetical index to work as a key to the classified arrangement. In libraries, it may be difficult to locate books without a subject catalog. Hence, a classified arrangement is not sufficient enough to serve the users. It's not incorrect to say that classification suppresses and scatters more than it reveals and collocates. Many information retrieval experiments have proved that no classification is able to retrieve more than 60% of the material available on a topic in a given library. Then, another limitation of classification is that all classifications are biased because they are classification of knowledge, and knowledge has some cultural and national biases. Even the DDC has got many biases that's known as Western, Anglo-Saxon, and Protestant bias. As a result, classification lacks universality. Let us say DDC has to be modified and supplemented with the new subjects when it is used outside USA, that is in Asia and Africa. Such extensions and adaptations have their own problems. Treatment may be worse than the disease, they say it. Knowledge is growing and changing in structure, so classification are not absolutely applicable all the times. Locally, we have to change a classification to suit the local requirements, but then it is an infringement on its universality. So this is another a problem of classification. Then let's talk about the reclassification. Every library has to reclassify because in the new addition of a system, classification modifies, relocates new subjects or add new subjects. Some old subjects are given new numbers. So a library has to give new numbers to those subjects which have been relocated in a new edition. This reclassification is a great problem which is always feared by the librarians. It is one of the great problems for the librarians to reclassify the old books according to the new editions. In the end, we can say that libraries are no exceptions. We use classification in libraries in various ways, but this classification is known as library classification or bibliographic classification, even book classification. Library classification is simply knowledge classification as applied to libraries for information retrieval. No library, if it is a service library, can exist without proper classification. In fact, classification has been called foundation study of librarianship, as modern librarianship started with the invention of the DDC in the late 19th century by Melville Dewey. Library classification can be categorized by the area of knowledge covered, that is general classification and special classifications. Special classifications are restricted to some smaller areas of knowledge or to some special kinds of documents. Classifications are also categorized by dividing knowledge. These are enumerative and faceted classification systems. It may be remembered that now it is the era of faceted classification system for shelf arrangement as well as for information retrieval. The days of enumerative classifications are over. Since 1876, many classifications have been designed, but all of these Three major systems are still surviving today. These are the Dewey Decimal Classification, Universal Decimal Classification, and the Library of Congress Classification, which are now very popular, used all over the world. India's colon classification, designed by Professor S.R. Ranganathan, though a very unique and scientific classification, is not popular as it has not been revised for long. With the coming of computers in libraries for information retrieval, it was thought that classification is no more required. In fact, in many departments of library science all over the world, they reduced classification component in their syllabi. Classification, however, has bounced back with a vengeance. Now we are going through a second revolution of classification in the digital era. In fact, in computerized databases and network information searches, classification has found new but powerful uses. Though classification has many uses, but it has got many limitations too, that I have already told you. Yet classification has its own many problems and difficulties and limitations. At best, it is an imperfect tool for organization and retrieval. Using classification in libraries may be costly, but it is much less so in using unorganized libraries. Classification has no substitute, but it has got many problems also. Concludingly, we can say that we have to work with imperfect tools till we create the perfect systems. But it looks that there is no perfect classification and we have to work as they exist now. To conclude, we can say using classification in libraries may be costly, problematic, but it is much less costly in using unorganized libraries. So we can say there is no substitute for classification in libraries.